Right, for his analysis on Premier Perrottet's sprint to freedom on Monday and an update on the wheeling and dealing between the PM and the National Party on net zero, let's bring in Editor-at-Large of the Australian newspaper, Mr Paul Kelly. He joins me now from Sydney. Paul, Dominic Perrottet resisted the calls to bring forward Freedom Day. There was an argument to bring it forward ahead of the weekend. He's saying no, it's staying as Monday, but he did announce a raft of extra freedoms, more than Berejiklian had on the table, some that'll come at 70% vaccination, the rest through at 80% fully vaxxed. The PM had his own press conference there and he got in behind these announcements. And of course, it's all critical for him, isn't it? New South Wales has got to keep meeting these benchmarks once it opens up. Hopefully it'll drive the other states to perform. He needs to get to Christmas and have all of these lockdowns ended because he doesn't want to start the new year, an election year for him, with the pandemic still front and centre, does he?
This is a big event, Peter, in terms of Dominic Perrottet putting his stamp on the job. And the message is he's a conviction politician. He's a believer. He believes in economic freedom and he believes in opening up. He announced a number of new measures which intensify the pace at which New South Wales opens up. That's very important. But he did more than that. He signalled that he will be in charge. He didn't have the Chief Health Officer with him, standing next to him. So the message is that he's changing the dynamics and the decision-making in terms of what happens in New South Wales. What happened then was that Scott Morrison, not surprisingly, committed completely to what the Premier was doing. And this is the essence of Scott Morrison's re-election strategy, of course. He backs the opening up of New South Wales. As far as Morrison's concerned, the New South Wales opening up must succeed. It's fundamental to his own election strategy. But of course, have no doubt, what's going to happen here is that the Premier's sceptical about this. The progressive politicians, the media, the health experts who don't like this will wait and watch. And if something goes wrong in New South Wales, if the strain on the hospital system is too great, if the opening up gets into difficulties, then they will launch a really savage counterattack. So there's a lot at stake here.
I want to get you into the whole issue of net zero, but I've got to ask you, you've got a wonderful sense of perspective over many generations of politicians. I thought we had left this Catholic bigotry behind us as a country. We've got plenty of faiths now in the Parliament. We've had Prime Ministers, politicians with no faith at all, something you wouldn't have thought of 30 or 40 years could be possible. But the Catholic staff now, 3 days after or 2 days after he was elected, is still absolutely front and centre, as we just saw in that Today Show interview this morning.
Well, Peter, this is just pathetic. It's dismal, and it's a pretty bad commentary on Australia. I mean, I can remember when Paul Keating became Prime Minister. Keating, of course, is a Catholic. There was none of this discussion. There was none of this debate. And the extraordinary thing about it, of course, is that it's a gigantic step back into the past. I mean, 30 and 40 years ago, we were having these sorts of debates in a sectarian Australia about whether one was a Catholic, whether one was a Protestant. And it's extraordinary that the progressive media, it's essentially the progressive media, want to relitigate these issues and reignite these debates. And of course, I think it's a highly dubious tactic because the fact of the matter is, we'll see how Dominic Perrottet goes as New South Wales Premier. But I mean, presenting himself as a conservative who believes in family values, who believes in economic growth, who wants to open up the economy, who wants to have a diverse society, well, it's hard to identify exactly what you would attack so far in that framework. But by honing in on the fact that he's considered to be or branded a very conservative Catholic, this is intended to give people an opening in terms of an attack on the Premier. Well, we'll see whether this works or we'll see whether it's counterproductive.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. Well, let's go to net zero. Resources Minister Keith Pitt was out today. He has two demands that are out there on the table, he says, for the National Party support to come over. This is all in relation to the Glasgow climate conference coming up. He wants $250 billion as a loan facility, basically for the mining sector, where they want to expand or have export markets open up, and they need access to capital, and the banks hold it back because they've all gone woke. He says the federal government should stand there with a loan facility. And he's also pushing for both agriculture and mining to be exempt from the targets. Now, we know that agriculture is exempt in New Zealand. He's wanting the same deal here in Australia. What are we hearing about the negotiations? Because I'm getting mixed reports out of Canberra that it's very difficult to land a deal with the National Party at the moment. And where do you think we'll land with the PM? Will he or won't he end up travelling to Glasgow?
Well, Peter, this is a very thorny and difficult subject to come to grips with at the moment, and you're completely right. There are all sorts of different reports about what's going on. The way I see it, I think that Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce are working pretty effectively together to try to put together an effective package which enables Australia to say that it is embarked on a far more ambitious emissions reduction target, while at the same time a lot of rural and regional and agricultural areas are being protected. Now, I think it's going to be very difficult to land the entire National Party room behind this deal, but it seems to me that it would be possible to get a majority, certainly strong Liberal Party support, and a majority of the National Party. Now, I don't really know the status of Keith Pitt's bid today, the extent to which this has the support of Barnaby Joyce, direct or indirect. It seems to be a pretty extraordinary demand, and personally I think the Prime Minister and the Treasurer would have a lot of doubts about going down that road. Having said that, I don't think there's any doubt at all that Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg are going to have to pay a fairly high price in order to get this deal. I think the Prime Minister does need the deal. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he needs Barnaby Joyce working with him in terms of repositioning the National Party and selling the deal. So this is going to be a really significant moment for this government and for relations between the Liberal and National parties, and for the National Party's relations with its own constituency. So I think there are still a lot of uncertainties. It's extraordinary. We are so close to this Glasgow conference and we still don't have the package.